Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here today. We are looking at a story that has completely captivated readers for well over 6 decades, Harper Lee's absolute masterpiece, To Kill a Mockingbird. But listen, today we aren't just going to recap the plot. No, we are going to deconstruct it. We're going to treat this novel like a giant puzzle, examining exactly how an author builds a world so powerful that it wins a Pulitzer Prize and literally never goes out of print. Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. First up, we'll cover the elements of fiction to get our theoretical framework. Then we'll move into setting the scene, followed by character in action. After that, we'll dive into the very real history of the 1930s South, and finally, we'll wrap up with the symbols and themes that tie the whole shebang together. Let's jump right into Section 1, the elements of fiction, setting up our theoretical framework. In a fictional universe, absolutely nothing is an accident. To truly understand the intentional choices an author makes, we have to look at how they build their characters. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle actually laid the groundwork for this millennia ago. He defined a story very simply as character in action. What he meant by that is our human nature simply can't help but reveal itself through what we do, through our activity. The way an author creates this, what we call characterization, well, that's the real engine of the story. Mostly because we just naturally identify with other people. Moving right along to Section 2, setting the scene in Macomb, Alabama. Before characters can act, they obviously need a place to exist. This particular story takes place in the fictional town of Macomb, Alabama, right between 1933 and 1935. And this specific setting is absolutely crucial. It traps our characters in a highly specific, inescapable era and location. Slavery has long been abolished, yet the Southerners in Macomb continue to strictly believe in and fiercely enforce white supremacy. The physical town itself is essentially a pressure cooker of old beliefs and simmering tensions. But physical setting is really only half the battle. We also have the mental setting, which brings us to point of view. This is the narrator's relationship to the story, and it affects literally every single line on the page. It dictates the tone, the mood, and exactly what information we, as the audience, are even allowed to access. And this brilliantly illustrates why Harper Lee's choice of narrator is just so compelling. The story is told from the first-person perspective of Jean-Louise Scout Finch. She's looking back as an adult, sure, but she anchors the narrative completely in her experience as a 6-year-old girl. Scout is a total tomboy, she's impulsive, she's emotional, warm, and highly observant. By filtering complex, heavy adult anxieties and deep societal flaws through the completely innocent, unfiltered lens of a child, Lee creates a unique tone that shifts effortlessly from funny childhood slang to really profound, serious reflection. Which brings us to Section 3, Character in Action, specifically focusing on the people of Macomb. Let's see Aristotle's concept applied directly to the citizens of this town. The crucial point here is how Lee uses characterization to highlight the sharp social snobbery and severe class divides of the era. Just look at how she contrasts two poor white families. On one side, we have the Cunninghams, hardworking, honest, and incredibly proud. They survive on almost nothing but always pay back their debts, even if it's just with hickory nuts or turnips. Then on the other side, we have the evils, described as dirty, lazy, dishonest, and foul-mouthed, having literally never done a day's honest work. This stark contrast tells us that in Macomb, poverty doesn't dictate morality, character does. And right in the very center of the town's moral compass is Atticus Finch, a widowed attorney and a true Southern gentleman. Atticus is highly respected, incredibly brave, and famously soft-spoken. He essentially anchors Scout's chaotic world. Every single action he takes is designed to instill strong values and morals in his children, acting as the ethical North Star for both his family and for us, the readers. Harper Lee also provides a very distinct characterization of Macomb's Black community. The source text describes this community as simple, honest, clean, and hardworking. They are depicted as God-fearing and respectful, ultimately possessing a stronger collective character than most of the white citizens in the town. Yet, despite all these virtues, they are shown as uneducated, oppressed, and deeply discriminated against by the society they live in. This stark contrast between their strong internal character and their completely unjust external treatment is really the central friction of the entire novel. All right, moving into Section 4, the real 1930s South, where we ground the fiction in reality. We can't fully understand the fiction without the facts. What's really devastating to think about here is the actual economic reality of the Great Depression. This wasn't just a backdrop, it was a gritty daily struggle for survival. Families lacked money for the most basic needs like food and shelter.
To put that into perspective, the per capita income for families in states like Alabama was between $125 and $250 a year. You had urban soup lines on one hand and many Southern Black families picking cotton for a meager living on the other. This crushing poverty amplifies literally every other tension in the town.
And compounding this economic devastation was the rigid, legally enforced segregation of the era. Between 1923 and 1940 in Alabama, the law mandated strict separation in nearly every single aspect of public life. Separate schools, separate waiting rooms, segregated theaters and water fountains, and total bans on interracial marriage. These were the inescapable daily realities. This wasn't just custom, it was the law, and it forms the rigid cage in which the novel's central conflicts play out. Lee was also deeply inspired by real-world events, most notably the tragic case of the Scottsboro Boys. In the 1930s, non-Black teenagers were falsely charged with assaulting 2 white women in Alabama. Despite the U.S. Supreme Court reversing their convictions twice due to constitutional violations, the local courts just continually retried them and found them guilty again and again. It wasn't until 1950 that the final defendant was paroled. This profound historical injustice directly mirrors the fictional trial of Tom Robinson in the novel, showing us just how almost impossible it was for a Black man to receive a fair trial. When we connect this historical context back to our literary framework, we see how conflict truly works. In literature, conflict drives what we call the obstacle, anxiety, relief cycle. Lee layers external societal conflicts like extreme poverty and brutal segregation with internal ones like the character Mrs. DuBose's brutal battle with morphine addiction, which, by the way, was a very real epidemic among Southern women at the time. These overlapping historical and personal conflicts create deep, continuous suspense for the reader. Finally, Section 5, Symbols and Themes, or the real meaning behind the story. Now, let's tie it all together. We've looked at the characters, the setting, and the history. A theme is essentially the main idea expressed in a work of fiction. Here, the incredibly specific historical setting naturally gives rise to the overarching themes of the novel, racial prejudice and social snobbery. But through characters like Atticus, Lee also introduces the counter-themes: morality, tolerance, patience, equality, and the desperate, urgent need for human compassion and conscience in a broken society. To reinforce these themes, authors use symbols. Remember, a symbol is any object in a story whose meaning completely transcends its literal definition. In a carefully crafted plot, recurring objects aren't just accidents. They carry heavy thematic weight and are placed there purposely to guide your understanding of the story. And this brings us to the most important symbol of all, the titular object, the mockingbird. In this novel, the mockingbird symbolizes everything that is good, innocent, and harmless in the world. Let this powerful quote sink in for just a second. The mockingbird only sings to please others, and therefore it is considered a sin to shoot a mockingbird. They are harmless creatures who do exactly one thing: they give joy with their song. This is the central moral thesis of the entire book, and it's a rule that the noble characters fiercely protect. So let's see how this symbol manifests in Aristotle's Character in Action. 2 main characters in the novel directly symbolize the mockingbird. First, Tom Robinson, a young, harmless, innocent, hardworking Black man who is falsely accused of a terrible crime and completely crushed by the prejudice of the justice system. Second, Arthur Boo Radley, an enigmatic, childlike man who is harmless and totally starved for affection, yet locked away and treated as a lunatic by the town's gossip. Both are innocent men, and both are either destroyed or severely isolated by the deep-seated prejudices of their society. By deconstructing the setting, characters, and history, we can see exactly how Harper Lee engineered a masterpiece that forces us to examine our own moral conscience. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to apply to your own world. If fiction is a mirror to reality, and the mockingbird represents the innocent and harmless among us who are targeted by societal prejudice, well, what modern mockingbirds are we failing to protect today? Keep analyzing the stories unfolding around you, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.